climate change, energy and environment will be the key issue that Prime Minister Modi will discuss with President Trump when both the leaders meet on Monday. Now, WION's Archith Seshadri caught up with the Deputy Director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Kartikeya Singh, for a better perspective. Take a listen.
Important dynamics between India and the United States will be to talk about an important issue: climate change, energy, and the environment. To what extent Donald Trump and Narendra Modi will discuss that on Monday is yet to be seen. But to get perspective on what the two nations need to do, we're joined by CSIS Chair, Deputy Director Kartikeya Singh. Kartikeya, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that. You're with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. How important is that conversation between Modi and Trump when it specifically comes to the energy sector?
So I think one of the things that people don't understand is how vibrant the dialogue has been between two countries on energy over the last 8 to 9 years. There's been a dialogue, the U.S.-India Energy Dialogue, that happens on a near annual basis. It's quite an extensive cooperation. There's 7 different working groups, everything from nuclear and thermal power to renewables and energy efficiency. And I think both sides had sort of struggled to communicate how vibrant this dialogue was. So many people don't understand that. So taking that perspective, then, we need to understand that energy has been a key pillar of cooperation, and we've heard that in the highest levels of discourse, even when this new administration came in, there was a recognition that energy needed to continue to be an area of cooperation. Now, of course, for the previous administration, this was sort of under the lens of climate change. And India, as you know, has a long history of sort of not wanting to be as proactive on mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. But under the Modi regime, we've seen a dramatic turnaround. When he and his government came into power in May of 2014, they ratcheted up the renewable energy ambitions of the country, shooting for the moon, essentially. And that garnered a lot of excitement here in the investor community, in the companies, in the renewable energy space, and certainly the leadership. And so it was a really key area of cooperation between the two countries using that lens. Of course, this administration has repeatedly said that it's been a bad bargain to be a part of the Paris Climate Agreement, and it's been unfortunate that they have misused facts and figures that have been out there, essentially pointing the finger of blame at India that it signed on only if it would get $2.5 trillion, which is simply not the truth. So with that backdrop, then ties seem a little bit strained on the energy and climate front. It'll be interesting to see how that's sort of mended here, if at all. Now, one of the things that's happened just over the last 3 days is something that was in the pipeline for quite some time, but it was just announced yesterday by Secretary Perry of the Department of Energy. That is this new research track on smart grids and energy storage technologies. Now, these are frontier technologies that increase the efficiency and resilience of grids, and forward-looking technologies like storage, which will be so critical. Without any language of climate necessarily, but certainly fitting within that ambit. And so that's one area that they can certainly talk about. I'll be curious to see if they can mend any of the climate mishaps on the dialogue on that front.
When it comes to specifics to the average consumer, how are they going to sort of reap the benefits, if any? You mentioned that this was perhaps a different dialogue with the Obama administration, but it is different with the Trump administration and him pulling out of the Paris climate deal. How essential is that? What does Trump need to do? And ultimately, what does this mean for the average American citizen?
Well, I think for the average American citizen, if you are to look at surveys on belief in climate change and the need to act on climate change, I think the majority is already there. I think if we're to look at subnational action in the United States beyond Washington, D.C., the states and the mayors that are sort of agreeing to fulfill Paris agreements, that's a large chunk of the population. Something like 1,400 mayors have signed on to meeting the Paris Agreement. That's 148 million people, a large percentage of the population here in the United States. Now, if you're going to have the growth of various industries, not just a certain sector that's favored, certainly renewables kind of are high up there. So if we want good, long-paying jobs here in the United States, we have to champion those industries. And if there are energy-hungry markets that are wanting access to technology, wanting to cooperate in that space, it certainly makes sense to sort of support that. And I think one of the things that I assume Prime Minister Modi will probably see based on interactions here in Washington is that it'll be important for New Delhi to go beyond Washington, D.C. to some of these states and cities and also engage Indian states in that dialogue. Ultimately, these conversations will need to happen between West Bengal and Iowa and Florida and Maharashtra, and it'll be interesting to see how both governments can facilitate the subnational cooperation where more people who see the impacts of climate but also need the jobs can be a part of the dialogue.
All right, Kartikeya Singh getting us perspective on both climate change as well as the energy between India and the United States. We'll have to wait and watch how that conversation goes between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi on Monday. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Archith Seshadri, WION.